Hello, and welcome to this Business with Smithco. Today we're going to be talking about the trends that you have in the primary sector. So when you're looking at the trends that the sectors have within the sectors of these of the market, you have to think, well, hold on a second. You've got your categories of industry, but what exactly affects them? What goes on? What actually changes them? What changes the face of things? And all of these things. Well, there have been multiple things. There have been things such as COVID-19, which obviously started in 2019 and lasted a long time. And that was one of the recent trends we had. That it increased demands for a lot of goods, and then also it also reduced the supply of a lot of goods, such as meats and all those other things. So there's a lot of situations here where you look at this particular thing where people are essentially saying their entire sort of, well, I guess you could say the what people want, it changes, and that can be of one of those things that can actually affect a sector in a good or bad way. Because if you can't make up its supply due to whatever reasons, then there can be problems. And I don't mean this as an individual person. I mean that this is the sort of thing where a lot of the time the whole industry can't give up. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that some people won't get it. In some cases, a lot of people will get it. The problem is that sometimes the primary sector might end up not being something that everyone can access. But you also have, for countries within the EU, things such as EU milk quotas. So a couple of years ago they were abolished. Dairy farmers are now in the EU free to produce as much milk as they can, which means that they are able to then just export it to other markets. So beforehand it was like, well, why would you produce a waste? Why would you produce a product that you're not going to use yourself? Of course, what would be the reason? Well, to export it. But the problem is, certain materials are what you might call very dangerous to just let people export. Because if I'm able to produce a material, right, for very cheap, very, very cheap, and I go, okay, we can really mass produce this. It's very, 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 it's very easy to produce, really. Yeah, we can basically make 20 times. Yeah, around 20 times what we need. So let's go ahead. Let's do that. The problem with that is that leads to problems for the markets, because if I'm now importing that good, suddenly now I'm realizing, well, there's going to be a massive fall in employment, because you're now importing all these goods that you can make. Now, other goods might not be in this case. For example, there are a lot of countries that may not produce cars. They don't even have one car manufacturing plant. So all the cars that are coming in that are being sold in dealerships and all these sort of things are all being imported. Now, obviously, that balance payments, balance trade, and all that sort of that goes into it. But obviously, the point is that this kind of thing where you're going, okay, well, we don't want that. We don't want someone to just come in and just basically destroy our own industry. And that's the key thing. That's why that's why you have these things where people are like, well, no, we don't produce any cars, so we'll let you import. And that's the key thing, because if you're a country that doesn't produce any like cars or any of those kind of materials where you import them, it's like they're in your country. And when I say they're in your country, I mean like they're in your country in shops. Like, customers don't need to import them themselves. They can just go to a local shop or, go to a supermarket with the and boom, it's there. And that's the kind of thing you have there where you're thinking, okay, so if you've got a good, however, that you can produce, well, that kind of is a problem. But of course, for the actual markets that, obviously, might now have a reduction in labor, that's a bad thing. For markets that have an increase in, sales, really, that's a good thing. So then you look at the idea of exporting. Once again, when it comes to that. And that is that a lot of the time, if you're exporting something that isn't that great for the environment, people go, well, yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. But then other people go, no, I don't really want to buy that. I mean, there's no other option, so I am. But could you have a different option? Somebody else goes, actually, yeah, we could. We actually make this unnecessarily unenvironment friendly. It's for profits, yeah. No, it's so we can have loads of money. Yeah, so we can cut the profits, or you can pay more, depending on, what our mentality is. And there you go. So that's the sort of thing I have here. Because now in the modern world, there's a lot of people who now want to have this organic food. Now, obviously, the thing is, organic food is food that doesn't have, pesticides, fertilizers, processing to it as much. It doesn't have that kind of, it has a greener sort of thing, And that's the key thing. Unlike other industries that might have to do things, might have to add money, add all these sort of things, organic is very simple. You just don't do those extra things. You don't spray your crops. And the problem is, of course, those sprays are not very good for you at all. So, there's that as well. There's this kind of thing where you're going, people are more health conscious. They do not want to be in the position where they're getting sick from food, just, maybe save a little bit of money. Now, obviously, that's not everyone, because not everyone can afford it. But the people who can afford it will oftentimes go, well, yes, I would prefer to have the organic food that doesn't slowly kill me over time than the non-organic food, which, does and will cause multiple issues, heart disease, all these sort of things. And that's the thing you have there, where oftentimes it's kind of changing in this sector will change this sort of thing, whereas the primary sector, well, they're going to have a different situation. You also have the introduction of a lot more, all these sort of things where people are making things a lot more, less meat is another thing you have there, where you might have vegetarianism and veganism, which obviously will harm certain areas in the primary sector. Mainly farmers who sell off, their cattle. And at the end of the day, you have to ask, well, you've got the farmer, got all these cattle, they have to sell them, they have to make a living wage, and suddenly there's a massive fall in demand for it. Now, obviously, people aren't going to eat less. In fact, they're actually going to eat more, because, meat tends to, fill you up a little bit more. So the fact is that's not going to go away. People are still going to be spending money. People are still going to be eating as much, if not more. But they'll just be eating that in other areas. Now that's still taking the primary sector, except of course if they move to processed, where the primary sector might be less required. For example, things that are totally processed, they are just, chemicals that are put together. Technically now, primary sector might come to involve in that a little bit, but not as much as it would when you look at just general things. And that's the sort of thing here, because a lot of time in the modern era where people are like, well, no, this, like beef, it's cancerous, it's, fatty, it's, bad for the environment, it's all these sort of things. But of course, you go, well, what about poultry? And you go, all these sort of other arguments you have here where it's like, well, other meats, can you class all meats into one? If you abandon meat altogether and you say, well, if you put, animals that don't have as big of a carbon footprint in the same bracket, are you essentially damaging that farmer and saying, yes, you are a goose farmer, you get the same treatment as a farmer who rears cattle. You're in the same position whereby you can't continue. But that's the sort of thing you have there, where there's all these different arguments. You go, well, by affecting the primary sector, it gets kind of dodgy in that avenue push. But you also have the whole system when you think, well, going on the screen front, what about investment into wind and solar energy? You need to do that. It's more reliable in many ways, and it's a lot more, how would I put this, a lot cheaper in the sense of, like, costing wise. Oh, how about this? Let's say I have a bunch of oil rigs. I own the majority of oil rigs in the world, and I go, okay, well, we had a bit of a reduced amount of oil we produced, so we don't have that much oil these days. I want to get some more. I just build another drill, but just for now, we're gonna put the price up. So you country, you'll have to pay that increased price, of course. And then you country there, there will be delays getting fuel to you. Yes, it's just those trade barriers you put up. I mean, if you had wind and solar energy, which would come from the sun and the wind, which goes all across the world, well, then of course you wouldn't have to rely on me, someone who is in another country, and there's all these kind of international trade things where you're getting very necessary fuels that provide necessary services, and there's all the kind of things here where you go, well, it's a completely different argument ready to be made, but we go, well, green solar energy, it's more reliability wise as a country thing. Like, international trade obviously is important, but is it always a good idea to let your energy hands just rest in on other people's in other countries, and specifically private industry? Because it's like, it's very dodgy, because you might be in a position where you have energy shortages. And why? Because you didn't build wind and solar. Because wind and solar, doesn't exactly do that kind of thing. Now, this is the kind of thing you have here, where a lot of the time you've got situations where there are many trends that affect the primary sector. There are many trends, and we've discussed some of these before. There's also things such as, if you're an EU country, things like subsidies changing, and there's all these sort of things where money going to them, and then of course there's farmers being like, well, that supermarket, they're paying us less. Like, if you go into a supermarket and the supermarket is pricing something below what it used to be, it's like, well, yeah, and the supermarket is not the one who's going to be taking that cut. And that's the thing that there was a big controversy about for many years, really. And it's the supermarkets are like, no, we don't care. If you want us to buy your goods, your primary sector goods, you're not a big business, so we will be buying them as cheap as possible. And that, of course, is the problem there, where it's like, well, yes, but there is, of course, a large cost to raising an animal, or a large cost to, grow this kind of food. So, there's all these sort of things here where these kind of things have effect on the primary sector. And of course, there are things that affect the secondary sector as well. And there's all sorts of things that will really affect these things. And those are the kind of things we'll be talking about in the next video. Please join us then when we're talking about the secondary sector. If you want to view other videos, it'll be absolutely fine. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, that'll be absolutely perfection. If you don't want to view other videos, but now and in the future, this is bye forever, then I hope you will enjoy the rest of your existence.